All right, welcome in to this week's Panther-Lair Show. A little bit later start to the live stream here on Tuesday night. Usually we try and get going at 8:30, but pushed it back about 32, 33 minutes, about a half hour or so due to Pitt basketball playing here on Tuesday night. We'll have this happen a couple times this season, and, you know, depending on how things go. I debated, you know, I knew there were a few Tuesday night basketball games, and so I debated, should we push the podcast back to Wednesday, or should we still go live and just, I mean, we're not going to go live during the game. Obviously, I'm watching the game. People who would listen to this podcast or join this live stream are watching the game. So I'm not going to, you know, I wasn't going to go live during the game because, well, I don't know. I don't think that would work. I guess we could do a game watch together, but I don't know if it has a lot of value through the week as a podcast. So I was like, well, what are we going to do? You know, how are we going to approach it? And one option, obviously, was to go live after the game. And instead of waiting until Wednesday, just do it as a post-game show, which we obviously did with the with football a lot this season, and had a lot of fun with that, and had a lot of, you know, I think we had some pretty enjoyable, entertaining live streams after the Georgia Tech game. We had a lot of people on here. It was fun. We were talking and, you know, having a good time talking about Pitt sports and sort of interacting in kind of a post-game show environment. And so, you know, I don't think we'll do it after every Pitt basketball game, but on Tuesday nights, hey, let's sit down, fire up YouTube, turn on the live stream, and just tape it live. And certainly this game here on Tuesday night had plenty to talk about. Pitt hosted Louisville at the Peterson Event Center, and the game goes down as a 64-54 loss for Pitt. The Panthers obviously playing without two main players, two key players, as well as their head coach. Two players out due to injuries, head coach out due to COVID. You know, those are the storylines for this game. But that's just sort of the start. I mean, everything that we talk about with this game, everything we talk about with Pitt's loss to Louisville on Tuesday night, and anything that happens for Pitt the rest of the way, it's all going to be in sort of the context of those injuries and those situations and those guys being out and what it means for the team and how it affects things. But there are a lot of storylines, I think, in this game, in this loss. And, you know, I mean, to be quite honest, I mean, you're not going to be encouraged to the point where you think, hey, they're going to win the ACC now or they're going to compete for the conference. But I do think you can come out of this game feeling maybe better than you thought you were going to. Pitt announced before the game, about an hour before the game, announced that Justin Champagnie and Audice Toney were out. And I think everyone expected the worst. Everyone expected an implosion. And that's not what you got. You didn't get an implosion. Yeah, they only scored 54 points, but you didn't get an implosion. You got a team that was competitive. You got a team that was chippy, that was willing to go toe-to-toe with ostensibly a better team. And we'll talk about Louisville and how good they actually are in a little bit. But I don't know. I didn't think it was the worst I've seen Pitt play in the last 3 years, the last 4 years or 5 years. This is it was a good performance. I mean, it was a gutsy, gritty effort, and I give him credit for it. I give all the players credit. I give Tim O'Toole credit for stepping in as the acting head coach. I don't think this is a game that you necessarily. I don't know. We'll have to take the temperature of the Pitt fans as we go through the live stream here. But I got to think you come out of this feeling okay. You know, better than you expected to going into it. All right, of course, this is the Panther-Lair Show. We got a lot to talk about with this game here tonight. We actually got a lot to talk about overall. I mean, obviously, there's Pitt's game against Louisville. There's the losses, the absences of Justin Champagnie and Audice Toney, which are huge. We'll talk about how those are going to affect the team going forward and what it'll mean for them. And then, you know, obviously there's some huge, not huge, I shouldn't say huge, but there's a lot of football topics as well. It kind of occurred to me, our last live stream, our last podcast was Tuesday night, a week ago, which is when we usually do them, the night before signing day, and we were right in the middle, about 42 minutes into our signing day preview podcast, when Kenny Pickett announced he was coming back. It was right in the middle of the show. And so we're going to get back to some of the recruiting talk on the football side. Rob Harley, linebackers coach, according to Football Scoop, is going to Arkansas State, presumably to be the defensive coordinator. We'll talk about the impact that has, or the impact it might have. We'll talk about that as well. So lots to get to and cover here on the podcast. Of course, first we give a quick shout out to our friends at Home Field. I got my Home Field shirt on here. I got a long sleeve shirt on because it's cold, but I got, the home field logo, home field representing with the sweet pit gear that they've got. You want to go to emergence.com and check them out. They have just high quality stuff, really good quality t-shirts, great logos. They got shirts for schools all over the country. They're licensed by, and they just put out great stuff. So if you're looking for pit gear, I don't know if you're going to get it by Friday, but you can get some stuff. You can get some really good pit gear for yourself, or for anybody you forgot to buy a gift for that you're going to give a belated holiday gift. So homefieldapparel.com. Make sure you go check them out. They just have great designs, you know what I mean? And they make a high quality product. And so I like t-shirts. I like sweatshirts. They make great t-shirts and they make great sweatshirts. So homefieldapparel.com. Make sure you check them out. Everybody got a drink tonight? I know I got a beer. I've got the RX Winter Ale, Winter Spiced Ale that they put out, Emsworth. This is not a sponsored bit. This is just me drinking beer while I talk about Pitt. So hopefully you grab a beer as well. I'm having one. Hopefully you're having something a little cool and refreshing here this evening. I know it's a Tuesday night, so we're not getting too turnt, but you can still have a beer and enjoy it. Enjoy the evening and kick back and talk a little Pitt sports. So this game here, 64-54 Louisville win over Pitt, and we'll jump into the chat right away because we got some super chatters chiming in. Michael B., the contribution to the show, we appreciate you. Chris, 2 questions. Why is Xavier Johnson in foul trouble so much this season? It shouldn't be happening with a point guard to begin with. And second, what is up with Gerald Drumgoole? He stinks, and for me, he shouldn't even be on the court. You think he'll be back next year? As far as Gerald Drumgoole goes, Michael B., I mean, why was he on the court today? Look at the roster they had. They were missing 2 guys, right? They had foul trouble for their point guard. I mean, they were moving guys all over the place. They had to do what they had to do. You can only play so many guys 40 minutes. And when you look at, the minute breakdowns here, let's bring them up just to check. Yeah, I mean, Ethiel Horton plays 34 minutes. After that, it's Femi Odekale plays 30. And, because Noah Collier's out there for 28 minutes. Xavier Johnson only plays 22 minutes due to the foul trouble, like you mentioned. They needed Drumgoole out there, and he only played 5 minutes. But, you got 12 minutes for Jeffress. And I think that pretty much covers everybody they had available. A guy like Gerald Drumgoole's going to have to play on a night when they don't have guys, and they have guys in, when a bunch of guys are missing and they have guys in foul trouble. So to that question, that's why. Xavier Johnson fouling out, I mean, his first couple of fouls, I think in the first half, were offensive fouls. And part of that, I mean, is just the way he plays. And it's something that, quite frankly, with Xavier Johnson, it's something you've been dealing with since he was a freshman. And early on, I think a lot of people appreciated his style of play. He drove into contact. He drew fouls a lot. But if that's what you do, and I'm not saying necessarily that he doesn't earn the fouls he gets, that he doesn't earn the charges he takes. Because, I mean, it certainly does. He gives himself up and he runs into contact. But you do start to get a reputation. And maybe this is the case with Johnson. Maybe it's not. But you do start to get a reputation where, officials maybe look at you differently because they know that this is how you play, that this is what you do. And so you're going to get called for some of those offensive fouls a little bit more. And so, him fouling out here or having the foul trouble in the Miami game, I think some of it is on the offensive end. I mean, defensive end, he plays hard on defense. He plays hard. I think whatever you want to say about Xavier Johnson, the guy lays it out there and gives everything he's got, and he busts his butt, and he's willing to give himself up physically. He's willing to do whatever he can to help the team win. It's just not, it's just sometimes it's counterproductive in some of his efforts and his attempts and his what he tries to do. This game tonight, he didn't hit a field goal until less than 14 minutes to go in the game. That was in the second half. He didn't hit his first field goal. And this was a big problem tonight. I give Pitt a real chance of beating Louisville, and they gave themselves a real chance of beating Louisville. But when you take Justin Champagnie and Audice Toney out of the mix, you have to get a big product. You have to get production out of Xavier Johnson. I mean, he's got to step up. He entered the game as prior to those guys getting hurt, he was the team's third leading scorer behind Champagnie and Toney. For active players tonight, he was the team's leading scorer. He needed to do better than 10 points on 3 of 9 shooting. I mean, he can't have a game like that. No assists, 3 turnovers, and things were working a little differently. I mean, the offense was working differently with, which maybe didn't set him up as well for assists because of the way guys like Sibande and Odikale were playing. But, I mean, he's got to do better than that. But, I mean, he's got to do better than that on a nightly basis. He's definitely got to do better than that when Justin Champagnie and Au'Diese Toney are not in there. And when you look at how close Pitt got in this game, if they could have gotten a little bit more out of Johnson, early or late, they have a real chance of knocking off Louisville and pulling an upset that none of us saw coming. And, I mean, it ends up being a 10-point game. But, look, from about – I wrote it down – yeah, I mean, so it was 24-9, and they went on that run and came all the way back. It was a competitive game. They were right there. Louisville was right there for the taking, and they just needed something else in addition to Femi Odikale and eventually Nike Sibande, and a little bit from John Hughley. They needed Xavier Johnson to lead the team, and he didn't really do that tonight, other than, leading in fouls and fouling out. He scored, like I say, 10 points, but he took 9 field goal attempts to get there. He's got to do better than that. And if Champagnie and Toney are going to be out for a while, or even if it's just Champagnie, they say Champagnie's out 6 to 8 weeks. Au'Diese Toney's day-to-day with an ankle injury. Champagnie 6 to 8 weeks with a knee injury. However much of that time Champagnie actually misses, it's going to fall on Johnson to carry the load, more so than it has. And I think there were encouraging signs in this game. I think there were guys who stepped up and guys who emerged that you would look at and you say, all right, that's a positive sign. That gives you encouragement for the future. Obviously, Femi Odikale played really well, and found some shots and hit some shots and found some confidence. Nike Sibande made a couple shots that should get him going. John Hughley continues just sort of piece by piece, inch by inch, getting better and more effective and sort of feeling himself a little bit more. He has 7 points and 7 rebounds tonight and looked strong doing it, and had a few more that he potentially could have had and, inch a little bit closer to that double-double mark. There are things that are encouraging, which is good. I mean, you need to see guys step up in any season, and certainly in this case, when you lose your leading scorer, your top 2 scorers, you need guys to step up. But you also need sort of the old reliables to do what they're supposed to do. And Xavier Johnson, fell short tonight. Maybe he's pressing. Maybe he knows Champagnie and Toney are out, and so he tries to do more. He tries to do too much. But, I mean, that's something you probably could have said about him throughout his career of trying to do too much. He's got some players around him that he needs to set up. He needs to get the ball to them. And, he'll knock down shots from time to time, but right now he's not hitting consistently enough that you're going to be able to rely on him as your primary source of offense. I think he wants to have that role. I think this team, if he could step into that role, it would be great for this team. But right now, he's not filling that role. And, in which case he needs to not hold it back, and take bad shots and make bad decisions and drive in. What we've seen out of him for 3 years now, and what we saw out of Trey McGowan's for the first 2 years of just driving for contact and trying to get contact. And either the basket goes in or you're going to the free throw line, and sometimes both. That's an okay strategy at times, but you have to be smart about when you try to do those things. You have to be, you have to execute it better. And it's just not happening with Johnson right now. But it needs to. He needs to improve for however long Champagnie's out, and then obviously once Champagnie and Toney are back, you'd like to have Johnson playing at a high level again. But Femi Odikale, certainly the big positive storyline to come out of this game. 7 of 15 from the floor, 16 points, career high. He goes 2 of 4 from 3, grabbed 3 rebounds, had an assist, had 3 turnovers, but and also 3 steals. I mean, it was a career game for the freshman guard. And once he started hitting some of those shots, I mean, he keyed the comeback. They were down by 15, and he led them all the way back to being down by 1, really on his own. He scored 12 points on 5 made baskets. He drained those 2 threes, and after that second 3 went in, you could just see him starting to really feel it. He had another shot where he dribbled to the free throw line and just kind of hit a sort of a fadeaway, and you could see that confidence building, which would be huge for Pitt. Now, it didn't really carry over to the second half. He only made, 1 basket in the second half, I think? 2 baskets in the second half? Something like that. But right now you're looking for whatever these freshmen can give you and whatever positive building blocks they can present. And Odekale presented a huge one here on Tuesday night in this game and damn near brought them back to beat Louisville. Got them all the way back in contention. Just needed to do a little bit more in the second half. Nike Sabande, another one that, he finishes with 8 points and 3 rebounds, I guess, but, 3 of 7 shooting. He's another guy who, this is his second game that he's ever played for Pitt. So there's going to be a little rust, a little settling in, a little bit of a comfort level, but he's a guy that they were already going to be needing big contributions out of, or significant contributions out of, even with Tony and Champagnie. But without those guys, it becomes even more significant. It becomes even more necessary to have somebody like Nike Sabande step up and make baskets and make plays. And that's what it's going to be about for, if it's 6 to 8 weeks that Champagnie's out, however long Tony's out, it's going to be about finding those guys who can step up. They don't have other guys who are Champagnie and Tony. They don't. It's not like your center's out, you need another center to step in. Or your power forward's out, you need another power forward to step in. Champagnie and Tony are really unique players. You're not going to find other guys who just do what they do, because there aren't a lot of guys that do what they do. They're unique in that way, and we've seen unique players roll through here in the past. There weren't a lot of guys who played like Nasir Robinson, or dating back even further like a Jerron Brown, and those guys were never the leading scorers on their teams. Champagnie and Tony play in a very unique style, and they have a very unique skill set, a very particular skill set, and it's got them leading this team. You're not going to plug in guys to take over for them. What you're going to end up doing is playing different lineups that look different, lineups that have, Odekale and Horton and Sabande on the court together, or what was the one they opened the second half with Johnson, Odekale, and Horton together, with Noah Collier and Abdul Kareem Koulibaly. You're going to have those kinds of lineups on the court just because you've got because you're going to have to play a different way, because you don't have guys you can plug in to run the offense through the way you ran it through Champagnie and to some extent Tony, who I think Tony gets as much off of sort of, use the football term, broken plays as anything, but you're not going to plug guys in to replace them. What you're going to do is you're going to have to find other guys to step up and score from different areas and in different ways. So if it's Odekale, if it's Sabande, those would be the two that we would mention now because they stepped up here on Tuesday night. Ithiel Horton obviously should be the guy. He should be the big one to step up, and thought after the Miami game, all right, he's gonna build on something here. He scores 18 points at Miami. You think, all right, he's got it going now. He's really started to settle in. He's gonna get it going, and this is all right. He'll be able to carry his load. And then Champagnie and Tony are out. All right, well, Horton, needs to carry over. Well, tonight he goes 3 of 9 from the floor, 0 of 3 from 3, which I don't know what's a more remarkable number or a surprising number. The fact that Horton only had 6 points. Then he only shot 33% from the floor, or that he took 9 shots and only 3 of them were from beyond the arc. Now, I don't know if Louisville was defending him really well. We'll have to ask our guy Steven Gertz to break that down and figure out why Horton only attempted 3 3-pointers. Johnson and Odekale both attempted 4, and Sabande attempted 3. Horton needs to be the guy taking all of those 3-point shots because he's supposed to be. And in the most recent game prior to tonight, he looked like the best 3-point shooter on the team. He's a big one that has to step up. I guess if you were going to circle guys to really elevate their games and make a big impact, Horton, Odekale, and Sabande. And then, probably a guy like John Hughley, who, like I say, I think has gotten more and more encouraging sort of game after game. And it's exciting to think about where he's going to be 2 weeks from now, a month from now, 2 months from now. But you need Horton to score. I mean, you need Horton to put up points. That was when you had Champagnie and Tony, Ethiel Horton was going to be the difference between, 8 wins in the ACC and 9 or 10 or who knows, even 11 or something like that. Now without Champagnie and Tony, you need Horton just to provide offense because you've lost 2 major sources of offense. And it's, we're now 7 games in, and he's had 2 good games and 5 duds. Needs to turn that ratio around right quick. Not only to, there's always the backstory of him living up to the hype that he got, when he was sitting out last season as a redshirt or, due to transfer eligibility rules. There's always that backstory for Ethiel Horton, but he just needs to step it up because Pitt needs him. I mean, they're counting on him. They're counting on, they entered this season counting on him to be a major source of offense. And thus far, outside of 2 games, in 7, he hasn't done it. Which that problem becomes exacerbated when you lose Champagnie and Tony. And I was thinking about this during the game too, and after the game, you talk about problems being exacerbated because Champagnie and Tony are out, or Johnson doesn't have a great game. Well, it looks even worse because Champagnie and Tony are out, and they're not there to provide a lot of the scoring. And so you notice it more. You notice Johnson's play more. You notice Horton not contributing more. And I think it works the other way as well, that anything positive that happens while Champagnie and Tony are out, anything is positive. Like Femi Odekale's performance tonight. It's always going to be sort of couched in this question of what if that would have happened with Champagnie and Tony there? Think about how good they could have been then. And I mean, Pitt's going to need those step-up performances. They're going to need those guys to emerge. But every time it happens, even if it gets them into some wins, it's going to be hard not to think, it'd be great if Odekale and Sabande had stepped up like this with Horton and Champagnie, or with Champagnie and Tony on the court too, because, boy, imagine how good they could be then. But that's down the road. We asked I asked a poll question on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com earlier this week, which I guess would be Monday, since there's only one other day that's been in this week thus far. But I said, what would you predict as Pitt's record after 5 games in the ACC? And they started off 1-0, obviously, after they beat Miami. And you look over the history of Pitt in the ACC, I think they've had 1 4-1 start. They've never gone 5-0, and they've gone 3-2 once or twice or something like that. And obviously Pitt has. They have Miami, Louisville, and then Duke, Notre Dame, Florida State. How do they stack up in there? And I think this Louisville game was one that you could have penciled into the win column. I penciled it into the win column with Champagnie and Tony. That prediction changed when they lost those guys. And obviously, the loss there, they get Duke, they get Notre Dame, Florida State. I think Duke and Florida State look like a bridge too far. I think Notre Dame is still a possibility, but right now it's hard to pick this team to have, it's hard to pick this team to have a lot of success against very many of its opponents in the ACC, because you lose those 2 guys and you get a ton of questions that I don't think were answered tonight, although we started to get some indications with some of these guys we're talking about. But it's tough. It's a tough blow to the team. And then of course they also have the added adversity of playing without Jeff Capel. They announced on Saturday that Capel had tested positive for COVID, so he was out. He was absent for this game, not present. Tim O'Toole, the one of Pitt's assistants, who himself is a former head coach, took over and ran things in this game. And look, I'm not smart enough to tell you what was different about how they played against Louisville versus how they played in the first 6 games. I can't tell you what the O'Toole impact is. I'm sure if they had won, we'd be all singing the praises of Tim O'Toole, and there'd be even 1 or 2 voices out there on the internet saying that maybe Pitt has the wrong head coach sitting in the head coaching chair on this staff. I'm sure those voices will always be out there. But it's just another piece of adversity. And in what's, not just a night of adversity, not just a season of adversity, but a year of adversity for Pitt and for everyone. And we're getting close to the end of the year, and people keep talking about, boy, I can't wait till 2020 is over. I mean, nothing's going to happen next Thursday or next Friday that all of a sudden things are going to be better. We're going to be still dealing with this, and we just hope that there's still basketball to talk about, a week from now or 2 weeks from now or a couple months from now. So let's jump here into the comments on the on the live stream, and we welcome everybody into the live stream. We appreciate you coming in at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You can subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's our YouTube channel. You always get notifications when we upload new videos. You get notifications when we go live. And you definitely want to check out some of the video content we have there at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, because it's particularly last week, we really put up a lot of good stuff, I think, with the recruiting side with National Letter of Intent Signing Day for football. We had interviews with Pitt's 3 big whippy old defensive linemen, Elliott Donald, Nikai Johnson, and Dorian Ford. All 3 of those guys together on a Zoom call, which was pretty fun. Had a Zoom call with 3 of Pitt's Virginia recruits, Miles Alston and Naquan Brown and Malik Newton. That was pretty fun, too. That was a good conversation. Had a nice video interview with Nate Yarnell, Pitt's quarterback commitment in the class, and then Terrence Rankle, one of the offensive linemen, who was a really smart guy, really well-spoken guy, really interesting stuff that he had to say. So go check out youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Subscribe to the channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and check out some of the videos we have there. Let's see some of the comments here in our live stream. Of course, we do this every Tuesday night. That's what I meant to say. I started talking about the YouTube channel. Every Tuesday night we get together, usually at 8:30, sometimes a little later if there's a basketball game. And we go on the live stream and we can have a conversation. It's like a post-game show. It's like a call-in show. You get in the chat, in the comments, you post your comments and questions and chat conversations, and we'll talk about it. And so we start off with Anthony Tennyson. He says they did good being shorthanded, but they need to practice free throws for 2 hours straight. And Anthony Tennyson follows up and says, I think Femi took a big step. I really think this will help him later. Yeah, I mean, free throws, they weren't good. They were, 42%? From the line. 8 of 19. That's not good to miss 11 free throws in a game and you lose by 10. You guys can do the math on that one. They obviously need to improve in that area. It's one of those things that, yes, they need to get better at free throws. It's always a necessity to get better at free throws. I don't know what the answer is to that, what the solution is to it. And I mean, you look down at who was missing the free throws. I mean, Odekale was 0 for 4. That hurts you a lot. I mean, Hughley and Brown combined 2 for 5. They're big men. They're going to miss free throws. That's going to hold you back. But I mean, Odekale and Sabande go 1 for 7. You got to do better than that. If you're guards, you need to knock those things down when you get those opportunities. They're gimme points. Johnson 3 for 4. You got to make them, and Horton 0 for 1. I mean, if you got a shot, from the free throw line, you're a guard, you need to make them more often than not. You'll take Johnson's 3 for 4 line, but Sabande and Odekale going 1 for 7, not quite good enough. And like I say, it looms large when you have a 10-point loss. Tony Tennyson also says, I think Femi took a big step. I really think this will help him later. Like I said, I mean, that was a big game for him. But what you saw, too, is as he got on a run there in the first half, Louisville said, oh, we better pay attention to number 2 here. Just like I turned to my son and said, hey, keep an eye on number 2. He's playing really well. Louisville said, hey, we better keep an eye on number 2. He's playing really well. Teams are going to know to keep an eye out for him. And if he ends up in the starting lineup or he's, one of the first reserves off the bench or whatever it is, other teams are going to be looking for him now. And he's not going to be able to get away with some of the things he got away with on Tuesday night. He's going to have to work more in the flow of the offense, work a little more to get his shots and find his shots. But if he gets hot again, and I think it's very possible you could, keep up the momentum and the confidence from this game. He looks like a good offensive option for Pitt. Particularly either whether he comes off the bench or if he moves into the starting lineup. Mark Cerny says, is it just me or did Justin Champagnie look like he was moving around pretty good on the bench as well as looked pretty upbeat for a guy out 6 to 8 weeks with a knee injury? I can't say anything about how he looked moving around on the bench. I'll take your word on that, Mark. He definitely did seem to be engaged. They showed him on TV, and he's talking to his teammates and cheering guys on and coaching guys up. And I think you saw Adese Toney. I saw him a few times. He would walk over to a player who came off the court and talk about what he was seeing or call out to guys when they're on the free throw line. And that's what you should get out of those guys. Toney's a junior, Champagnie's a sophomore. They need to act like veteran leaders. They're the leading scorers, and they need to be team leaders along with Xavier Johnson. And that shouldn't end just because you get hurt and you can't play. I remember even last year on the football side, Rashad Weaver, tore his ACL in training camp, was out for the season, but was still heavily involved. Went on, I think, all the road trips. Had a headset on. He was in the mix. He's coaching up his teammates and helping guys, telling them what he sees. Toney and Champagnie don't score all the points they score just on pure natural talent alone. They've got a feel for the game. They've got basketball IQ, and they have knowledge they can share with their teammates, particularly the younger guys. And it's good to see them, still engaged on the sideline, on the bench, trying to help other guys out. RJ Seaman 38, one of our friends, always a friend of the show, super chatter. We appreciate him jumping in. Says Louisville really fast is how I was always taught to say Louisville. Yeah, I tend to say it that way too. But man, the announcing team tonight, I forget who they were on the game. They were hitting the Louisvilles real hard. Louisville, and I think people from Louisville would hate hearing Louisville, but that was how they were saying it. I try to stick to the Louisville. Josh Newark, another friend of the show who always chimes in on the podcast. We appreciate you, Josh. Says, what's the bigger story? Pitt fans speculating about Pat Narduzzi Twitter emojis to Rob Harley or Juju's TikToks? Man, you're talking about a lot of things that I just don't usually ever spend much time on. Pat Narduzzi had some emojis that appeared to be a subtweet of some kind at someone, apparently. I don't know. I even asked one or two people at Pitt, do you know what he's talking about? They said, I don't know. And sometimes a person will tweet something, and that person might be of relevant interest to me as someone that I cover or affiliated with a team that I cover or something like that, a Pitt coach or a Pitt player. And I've given up on trying to guess at what they mean. The best thing we always do, and we'll get back into the comments and questions about the basketball team in a second. The best thing we always do is we take a college kid's tweets, vague tweets, and put, sports-related context on them. So a college kid, a college football player might tweet out like, "Can't trust anybody anymore." Time to find a fresh start, right? Immediately you and me, we look at those tweets, and because we look at everything through the context of college sports, we think, oh no, it's this guy. He might be thinking about transferring. It sounds like he's angry with the coaches. He might be leaving. When in reality, when he says he can't trust anybody anymore, he might have loaned $5 to a bum on the street who said he was going to come back and give him $3 change, and he didn't get it back or something. Or time for a fresh start might just mean that he's going to use a different laundry machine in the towers or something. And oftentimes, a lot of times, they're tweeting about women, or girlfriends or something like that, and they're talking about who they can trust or, looking for something new or something like that. And we always think, oh, it must mean that he's transferring. I've learned over the years to stop trying to read into people's tweets. And I really don't care about Juju Smith-Schuster's TikToks. I'm so glad I cover Pitt and not the Steelers, so I don't have to worry about asking guys about dancing on the logo or their TikToks or any of this nonsense that I see these Steelers guys talk about all the time. I don't want anything to do with that. I don't want anything to do with that whatsoever. So, Josh, I appreciate you asking. I have no thoughts or comments on those specific topics. Dale Gribble says, it could have been a lot worse. Without two starters losing, playing Virginia Tech and Duke without Justin's going to be rough. Yeah, missing Champagnie for every game is going to be tough because he is playing at a really, really high level this season. He was outstanding. We talked about how he made history, with back-to-back 2020 games. He's one of like 2 players in the ACC averaging a double-double. Is it 2 players in the ACC or 2 players in the nation? I'm going to look at that because I think that's important. I've got the thing right here. In the ACC, I'm sorry, that makes more sense. Just Champagny, he's averaging 17.8 points per game, 12.3 rebounds. There's only 2 players in the ACC averaging a double-double, and he's one of them. He's got double-doubles, 3 double-doubles in 6 games this year. He scored in double figures in every game this season. Like I mentioned, he had 2 2020 games. He's playing at a really high level. He's been outstanding this season, and they're going to miss him. And every game is going to be tougher because they don't have him. It makes things harder when you don't have your best player, and he is undoubtedly their best player. And then you take Tony out of the mix, and it gets extremely difficult because he was playing really well this season, really played well dating back to when he, returned from injury last season. So you miss those 2 guys, you take those 2 guys out of the lineup, but you absolutely miss them. And it absolutely could have been a lot worse. This ends up 64-54, but Louisville kind of pulled away a little bit at the end. There was a significant chunk in, the final 7-8 or so minutes of the first half, and the first 14-15 minutes, I guess, or 13 to 15 minutes or so of the second half, where this game was legitimately in question, where Pitt really looked like if they could just get one run, if they could just put together one run, make a couple stops and make some baskets on the other end, they could pull this thing out. And I'll tell you one thing that they really struggled was offensive rebounds. That was a big problem. 8 offensive rebounds in this game. John Hughley grabbed 4 of them, so good for him. Team offensive rebound, plus William Jeffress had 1, Odekale had 1, Xavier Johnson had 1. They needed to do better on the offensive glass. They, particularly early in the game when they dug that 24-9 hole, there was just too many one-and-done possessions for Pitt. And it happened again in the second half as well. They needed to have more opportunities for second-chance points. 8 offensive rebounds, they get 10 second-chance points. That wasn't good enough. And they shot 40%. They had a decent day shooting, but they had to get more offensive rebounds. And that was probably as much as anything. That was a big part of why this game went down the way it did. I think that was a huge issue in this one. And that's, you're losing some of that with, Champagny and Tony. Just kind of looking at the stats real quick. Champagny had 22 offensive rebounds in 6 games. Tony had 14. So, between them, 36 offensive rebounds. It's about 6 per game between those 2 guys. So, you're missing that. You're missing that element that they obviously bring to the table, and I think it stood out tonight. Let's see here. Some football questions we will get to in a second. Josh Newark says basketball freshmen are really looking good early. Nice pieces for the future. And, I agree. I think I didn't know what to expect out of Femi Odekale. I didn't know what to expect out of Noah Collier. I thought John Hughley would be good right now, and I thought William Jeffress would be good as he grew up, because it's still kind of early, and as you all know, he is young. Meanwhile, I think Jeffress only played 12 minutes, only took 1 shot. He looked more promising earlier in this season. It's going to take him a little bit of time. I think Hughley has been everything. Well, I can't say everything I expected him to be. I expect him to be better, just because you expect everybody to be better than they are. But I think he's shown a lot of signs of promise. Kind of like Josh said, I think you like what you see out of him and where he's going. And then I think Collier and Odekale have been totally a surprise. I didn't expect those guys to play like they have as freshmen. Largely I'm basing this on what they did here tonight against Louisville. I think both guys played really well. Collier has 4 points and 2 rebounds in 28 minutes. Not a huge stat-stuffing night. But I thought he looked really good. I thought he defended really well. And of course, Odekale, like we talked about, the 16 points and the 3 rebounds in 30 minutes, a career game for him, and 3 steals as well. Career game for Odekale, and I think both of those guys showed a lot more promise tonight than I probably even expected them to have when they came in as recruits. And so, yeah, absolutely, it's encouraging. It's just going to be tantalizing to watch these guys if they continue to improve and continue to get better. It's just going to be tantalizing to think, boy, what could have been with Champagnie and Tony for each of these games, and how good could they be if they actually just had everybody together at full strength. Let's see here. Royce Beacom says, even with Tony and Champagnie, Pitt loses the rebounding battle tonight and probably the game. I don't know. What did this end up being? The rebounding difference, yeah, it was pretty severe. I knew the numbers were severe in Louisville's favor, but 45-26 is a pretty strong number. And, kind of glancing down, Louisville grabbed 15 offensive rebounds. They got 15 second chance points as opposed to Pitt getting 10 second chance points and 8 offensive rebounds. I thought that was a big part of it. I do think Champagnie and Tony would help on the offensive end, though. To your point, Royce, about they'd still lose the rebounding battle. They might have still gotten out rebounded, but I think they would have been more competitive on the offensive glass and grabbed more offensive rebounds. Louisville had 30 defensive rebounds. Yeah, and Pitt had 8 offensive boards. So I think that gets balanced out a little bit more. And when you give Champagnie and Tony opportunities for second chance points, I think they tend to capitalize. I think they tend to finish those plays. And so I think you might be right. I think they would still probably get out rebounded. I don't think the numbers would be as severe as they were. And more importantly, I think they would do better on the offensive glass, which would give them a better chance of winning it. I don't know. I can't guarantee that Pitt would have won this game with Champagnie and Tony. I think they would have had a real chance. I think they would have had a real shot. Let's see here. Looks like most of the basketball questions there. I mean, we'll see how this team develops. It looks like we've gotten through most of the basketball questions, I should say, in the chat. But we'll see how this team develops. It's still really important for Pitt, obviously, to get Xavier Johnson playing smart, efficient basketball and producing at a higher level than he has been. But that's been the case all season. That's been something they needed all season. That's been something they're always going to need. And I'm not sure how they get it or what they need to do to get it, other than just keep trying, But, otherwise, you get good performances out of Odekale. You get some, impressive looks out of Hughley. You get Sabande potentially coming on, and if you could get Horton going again, I think they're, it just might be a game-by-game building process with this team, as opposed to entering the ACC schedule ready to compete like they were. They're going to have to kind of build up to something, I think, until, at least, either until they get Champagnie and Tony back, or until some of these guys kind of grow up a little bit and, get a little more ready for prime time. All right, coaching or football questions over here. Mark Cerny asks, does Pitt have any real shot to get MJ Devonshire? That's Marlon Devonshire, the cornerback prospect from Aliquippa who went to Kentucky. He's now in the transfer portal. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I think Pitt's willing to take him. I think they're sort of doing their due diligence on it to see if he is somebody they would want to take. He wasn't playing a ton at Kentucky. I don't think he was a starter there. We've certainly seen guys go away, leave Western Pennsylvania and then decide to transfer. Not too many of them end up back at Pitt. There are, I think there have been some over the years, but not too many under Pat Narduzzi, and I think there have been opportunities to get guys back into Western Pennsylvania since Narduzzi became the coach, and it hasn't generally worked out. I think sometimes Pitt has been not too willing to take those guys, from time to time. Just because they're not really sold on them as players. We'll see what they do with Devonshire. I think they'll get a look. I would think West Virginia will get a look as well. And then, we'll see. I don't have a good feel for that yet. He just went in the portal today, I think. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him. And Rummy asks, what's your favorite Christmas movie? And RJCman38 replies, Die Hard. Sure, I'll take that as an option. I'll go with Die Hard or Rocky 4. Pick one of those two as as one of my preferred Christmas movies. Let's see here. RJCman38 says, I'll judge basketball the same way as football. Look for improving recruiting classes and the Sweet 16 by year 5. That's reasonable in my opinion. I like what I see on the court. Sweet 16 by year 5, huh? Well, we're in year 3 for Capel. Is he 2 years away from a Sweet 16 run? I don't know. That's tough for me to say. I like a lot of the pieces. I mean, I guess I could see it. If Femi Odikale, I'm not going to put everything on Femi Odikale, but I mean, starting in the backcourt, you need him to develop over the next 2 years. I think you got a good piece in Hughley for the next 2 years. If we're looking 2 years down the road on whether Pitt can get to the Sweet 16 in 2 years, you got a good piece in Hughley that you like. I like with William Jeffers. I think his potential is really high. I guess maybe with those three, Odikale and Jeffers and Hughley, you might have a shot in 2 years. Ethiel Horton could potentially still be on the team in 2 years. Technically, Justin Champagnie could still be on the team in 2 years. I don't know if he's going to make it to 2 years from now, but technically he could be on the team. He'd still have eligibility left. I guess I would say that. All right. If Justin Champagnie's still on the team 2 years from now, then yeah, I think they would have a real shot to make a run at the Sweet 16. You have him as a senior, John Hughley as a junior, Femi Odikale as a junior, William Jeffers as a junior, potentially some more transfers that Jeff Capel would bring in, and then ideally if he recruits at a high level over the next 2 years, sure, I could see it. Sweet 16 in 2 years, why not? We'll see if they actually get there though. See what it means. RJ Man follows up. I'm thinking this season is slipping away due to COVID. What say you? I don't know. I mean, football made it through. Football made it a whole season, and I was skeptical of that ever happening. So I'm maybe not the best judge. It's going to be interesting to see. And I saw some reports during the game. I didn't get a chance to dig into it, but kid from Florida, Keontae Johnson, I guess is his name. If his condition ends up being tied to COVID, it's going to be interesting to see what the NCAA decides to do. They may end up following the pro sports leagues. They may stick with it as long as the NBA does. I mean, everybody's talking about March 11th, and that really was the day when it all broke loose, and that was the night when the NBA closed everything down, and that really was, I mean, that was the domino. That was where it all really started falling apart. So I think if the NBA keeps playing, the NCAA will try. But if they have a guy, one of their own who has to go into the hospital potentially with a COVID-related issue, it's going to get more and more challenging. Do I think they'll shut it down? I think you would need a bigger outbreak than that. Sadly, I think you would need a lot of guys. Maybe not a lot, but you would need more guys in critical conditions to shut it down. But I just don't know. I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not. I don't know. All through football season, I would say this. All through football season, I felt like it was always, 1 day away, 2 days away from everything getting shut down. And I always kind of felt that way. And I got lulled to sleep a little bit when Pitt was doing so well before that Georgia Tech game got postponed. That it really actually surprised me when that happened. I was like, whoa, wait, what? Wait, how is this happening? No, I thought they were good. I thought everything was in good shape. But so I'd spent so much of the season waiting for that shoe to drop, and then it finally did, but it happened so late in the season that it caught me off guard. It surprised me. So I think I'm going to probably spend most of this season kind of feeling the same way, waiting for that shoe to drop of, all right, games are getting postponed, games are getting canceled. And we've seen, games in college basketball are getting postponed. They're getting canceled. They're getting moved around. we'll see if that happens, and if it continues to happen, if the volume increases, then I gotta think you're gonna miss some time, miss some games, and potentially have the season be in jeopardy. But I think I'm gonna spend most of my time waiting for that to happen, just because it seems like, it's always a possibility. PitFan234 says, "Hey Chris, thanks for these chats. I enjoy these a lot. How do you feel about Izzy next year? He's a lot stronger than I realized." I'm guessing you're talking about Izzy Abanikanda, the freshman running back. I think he's got a lot of potential. I think he was hurt this season. I think he missed time because of that. I think that limited his opportunities. It limited his practice time. I think it limited, his preparedness and what the coaches felt like they could trust him to do on the field. I think that held him back as much as anything. But I still think he's got a lot of potential. I think he's got a really high ceiling, and I'm really intrigued to see what he can become. I think he could be a really good running back for this team. And quite frankly, I think they're going to need somebody next year. I know Vincent Davis is coming off the best performance by a Pitt running back in 3 years. But I still think they need to find some answers at running back for next season. And I think Izzy Abanikanda could potentially be one of those answers. I think Malik Newton or Rodney Hammond could potentially be one of those answers. And then, of course, you have the guys coming back, and Vincent Davis and Daniel Carter and apparently A.J. Davis and apparently Todd Sibley. First of all, I can't imagine all of those guys are on the roster next year. So that's sort of the first thing you have to say and consider, is that they're probably not all going to be here. If they are, that's a crowded running back room. I don't know who emerges, though, because we've seen who Vincent Davis is. We've seen a lot of Vincent Davis. We've seen a lot of A.J. Davis. We've seen a fair amount of Todd Sibley. We've seen not really much of Daniel Carter and not really much of Israel Abanikanda, and certainly nothing of Malik Newton and Rodney Hammond. So, you've got you run the gamut in terms of experience, you run the gamut in terms of exposure, and I think you run the gamut in terms of talent. And I think Abanikanda is really talented. I really like Malik Newton coming in. I think Vincent Davis has some things that he does well. I think Daniel Carter has some things that he does well. Finding the right mix and balancing those guys and getting them, in at the right time, and using them and finding the hot hand. That's what the coaches have to figure out. And they also have to figure out how to block. You have to figure out how to get the O-lineman to block for the running backs, and they have to figure out on a scheme, and how committed they are to running the ball. So let's see, PitFan234. Any transfer news with Pitt bringing anyone in besides some interest in Devonshire? I think they're involved with a bunch of guys. I think they're poking around with a bunch of guys. I think they're looking at a bunch of guys. There's so many guys in the transfer portal right now. I think it's like over 800. I think they're going through the portal and seeing what they can find. I don't think they feel like there's any rush to get someone in right now. They've got a little less than a month until the spring semester starts, so you've got plenty of time to find some guys who could fit holes you may or may not need. They probably don't have a lot of spots available. After signing 22 guys last Wednesday. They probably don't have a lot of spots available, but I think they could find a couple of guys who could help, whether it's at, take your pick of positions. I don't think there are any positions that Pitt couldn't stand to bring in a transfer who would be an upgrade. Probably quarterback would be the one that they don't do it. But otherwise, they could probably use someone at just about every spot. Maybe outside linebacker. But even there, if you really like an outside linebacker, you can find ways to get reps for a transfer and Servassier Dennis and Cam Bright. Not to mention some of the freshmen this year, Solomon DeShields and Bengali Kamara, who I think showed a lot of flashes, and I think those guys are going to be good as well. So, the coaches they're digging through the portal. They're looking at all these guys. I actually think they're on a little bit of a holiday break right now, but I'm sure they're still looking at everybody they can find out there, because you got to turn over every stone, because you never know what you're going to find, and there's certainly a lot of stones out there in the transfer portal this year. Let's see, I think that's about it. I think it's everything we wanted to talk. I was going to talk a little more about recruiting, and I guess Rob Harley, the last thing on that, Rob Harley, Pitt linebackers coach, reportedly joining Butch Jones' staff at Arkansas State, presumably as the defensive coordinator. Harley was a member of Pat Narduzzi's original coaching staff that came in December of 2014, January of 2015. One of only 3 guys that was still on the staff this year from that original staff. The other 2 are Tim Salem, the tight ends coach, and Andre Powell, the running backs coach. Harley, I think, he's a younger guy, but he's been in coaching for a while. He's been at Pitt for 6 years, probably looking to make a move up. And even if it's a step down in, a step out of the Power 5 conferences to be a defensive coordinator at Arkansas State, it's still an opportunity to call a defense, which I think is probably the move you need to make if you're in a position like Harley is in. And so I can understand it. I think he probably wanted to be defensive coordinator at Pitt a couple years ago when Pat Narduzzi hired Randy Bates. So, that's an opportunity he's probably been looking for. He finally got it with Butch Jones at Arkansas State, via con Dios, right? I think he was a decent recruiter. He had the recruiting coordinator title, which is, I think, maybe more of an administrative title than reflective of his recruiting prowess. I think, and I think as a linebackers coach, I think you could definitely say the play of the linebackers improved in recent years. But is that due to the coaching or is that due to the talent? I would say I'm often inclined to point to talent, but I would say, you look at Cam Bright, you look at Phil Campbell. Those are 2 guys who maybe weren't projected to be as good and as productive at outside linebacker as as they ended up being. So that's a credit to him. You look at Kylan Johnson getting assimilated into the defense pretty quick and having a really strong season last year. That's a credit to Harley. And then Servase Dennis coming in and playing like he did as a sophomore. That's a credit to Harley as well. So I think the talent has improved at linebacker, but I think, Harley gets some credit for those things too. I think the guy you bring in to be your linebackers coach next year, you want to have a strong recruiting foundation. I think it's so important for this program just to get talent in here, and continue upgrading the talent. And if you have a chance to make another hire someone who can upgrade your recruiting, even over, above where it is right now. And I'll say this also. I think Pat Narduzzi has flexibility in the hire that he makes because he's got Randy Bates on staff right now as a defensive coordinator. Bates' background is coaching linebackers. His Twitter handle, I think it still is, was at Bates Backer. He was a linebackers coach at Northwestern. And so that's, Pat Narduzzi's next hire doesn't necessarily have to be a linebackers coach. Because if he wants Bates to coach the linebackers, Bates could do that. And that allows Narduzzi to if he wants to hire another offensive coach, he could do that. If he wants to hire or move a different guy around or do something, he's got, he can do a lot of things because of Randy Bates' position. I also think, we talk about position coaches. I think Archie Collins or Corey Sanders could probably coach linebacker as well. I'm sure they know the roles of the linebackers in this defensive scheme, and I think they understand the fundamentals. Those guys are smart. They're coaching Pitt's secondary right now, and Narduzzi could move one of those guys, I'm sure, if he were so inclined. And then the last question here, Tyler Buchanan. Since Rob Harley was the recruiting coordinator, will it affect recruiting moving forward? It seems we've been making a push there recently. Recruiting coordinator is a behind-the-scenes administrative role. I once asked Harley, what are your duties as recruiting coordinator? He said it's largely to act as liaison between the coaching staff, the coaches, the individual coaches, and then the recruiting staff. To kind of connect those guys. I think there's a lot of paperwork and things like that. It shouldn't affect Pitt's recruiting all that much. They've got a really strong recruiting staff in place, and I'm talking about the sort of in-office administrative guys, the Graham Wilbert and Carl Zovko and Adam Kalturi and Mickey Jacobs. They've got a really strong in-house recruiting staff to go with some really good recruiters on the coaching staff. So I'm not really worried about this Rob Harley move affecting recruiting all that much, other than the potential to bring in a really strong recruiter to replace him. So that's what I would be looking for. If I'm Pat Narduzzi, I would want to find someone who can do some damage on the recruiting trail and help improve and increase the talent level on this team. All right, I think we've expired all our topics. I appreciate everybody tuning in here on a Tuesday night. A little bit later start, a little bit later finish than we usually do, but Pitt basketball game, we went live after the game, so we went a little bit later. We'll do this every time Pitt has a Tuesday night game, unless it's like a 9 o'clock game. I don't know if we'll stay up that late, but we'll see. Maybe we will. Who knows? We have fun with it. We will do that. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to Panther-Lair.com on YouTube. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Subscribe to us there. We appreciate that. And, of course, the website, Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, we have message boards where you can interact with hundreds and thousands of, really your closest Pitt fan friends. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Go to homefieldapparel.com for all the best Pitt gear you can find, shirts and sweatshirts. They have awesome stuff there, homefieldapparel.com. I can't endorse them enough. And, have a great rest of the week. Have a great holiday. Enjoy the holiday this weekend. And, it's been a crazy year. It's been a wild time. And, hopefully you can just take a few minutes and just appreciate that we're all still here, right? And and we're all still here for Pitt sports to give us gray hairs and, lead us to sitting here talking on the internet until 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. So thanks for tuning in all year long. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. Have a great holiday. And I guess we have one more podcast this year. Next Tuesday night, we'll be live at 8:30. Or we won't. I think the Duke game is next Tuesday night. So we'll figure out the schedule, and I'll be sure to tweet it at Panther-Lair. Thanks again. Have a great holiday this weekend. Have a great rest of the week, and we will talk to you next week.